In this update, we've got these persistent weather setups that tend to train over the same areas going into your Memorial weekend and actually extending into next week. Good morning, everyone. How's it going out there? This is Wednesday, May the 24th, and today is my oldest son's graduation. Yes, it's an emotional day for us in the Ponder household. We've got our oldest son graduating from high school. He'll be going off to college. And then we have another one, our youngest son, that's transitioning out of middle school and heading into high school next year. So it's going to be a big day for us. So I'm going to give you an early update on these weather setups going forward. You can actually see this morning on the satellite picture, we've got this persistent low pressure center we've been talking about for a while that's just kind of sitting and spinning off the southeast coast. And then we have another cold front. We got actually a little cool shot coming up here into the northeast. That's going to bring some cooler rain showers for portions of New England, and that will be dropping southbound, lowering those temperatures and bringing more drier conditions for that area. At the same time, we've been just watching these persistent northwest flow type setups, these mesoscale convective systems that travel from the northwest down to the southeast, that blow up over the Rockies, down in the Texas panhandle, and then it could be big time hail producers out here in West Texas, and then they tend to fade as they push off to the southeast, but bring in some gustier winds. And we're going to be seeing multiple complexes of these transitioning going forward. If we can take a look at the big picture in the last 3 days of rainfall, we've seen this setup, right? So we've seen this stalled frontal boundary that's draped across a good part of Florida that's just inundated with the heavier rain, complements of that low pressure just hanging off the coast. And then we've got these persistent just northwest flow type setups, and they bring, larger hailstones. Some of these could be, golf ball to tennis ball size hail out into the panhandle and West Texas. And then they bring those heavier rains extended into the panhandle, back into portions of central Texas and also West Texas. And we've seen these setups, going forward. We've seen a dramatic change in the Southern Oscillation Index. I mean, we were been in this La Nina, 3-year La Nina, back to back to back, very, very rare event. And we're finally making that transition. You can actually see this is the latest update, this dramatic change. And so we had a positive 10 back in February where we were under that La Nina type conditions. But we made the transition back into March, heading out of the La Nina and going into what is called Enso neutral, which is basically average or zero. And we've seen that March and April, and now we're transitioning to May, and we've seen a dramatic change, a negative, on the 30-day moving average, a minus 11. That's significant change where the Southern Oscillation Index, the subtropical jet streams get a lot more active. And we've seen these dramatic drops here lately, a negative 64 on these daily drops. We're doing a rapid surge to El Nino status. And to break this down into layman's terms, it's not going to be an official El Nino until this number gets to -8. But we are certainly on our way. And that activates the subtropical jet stream, and the southern branch is going to be becoming a lot more active going forward. And right now, here's the setups going into Thursday into Friday timeframe. The green is your moisture. That's your, above average rainfall, and the brown is your drier conditions. So what we find is we just get locked in these setups, right? So we've got this low pressure just kind of hanging out the Florida coast. That's bringing the tropical flow. And finally, I think by Friday into Saturday, this is finally going to be moving inland to the Carolinas. At the same time, we've got a dominating ridge of high pressure up to the north, back into the Ohio Valley. That's much drier, sinking air. I don't see a lick of rain anywhere to speak of up there. Then we just got that persistent, dry slot off the southwest coast. And then in the middle of the country, we just got this beater band that lights up across eastern portions of the Rockies. And then that traverses off the northwest flow and dives southeast. And these storms tend to kind of gravitate over the same areas. I mean, think about it. If you got all the layers of the atmosphere moist, you got the ground starting to get saturated, the next system tends to gravitate towards that air mass versus to gravitate towards the drier air, and it tends to fizzle out once they hit that drier air mass. So we tend to get in these patterns that we have the same areas getting persistent shots of showers and thunderstorms. And then we have outside of those areas and the dry slot where they basically get nothing but high and dry conditions. And that's exactly what we're going to be finding going forward. So here's Wednesday. This is for today. We've got that stalled frontal boundary draped across Florida, more heavier rains in the afternoon hours for them. And then again, we've got more storms coming in off the northwest flow, blow up over portions of the Rockies, travel down into portions of New Mexico, into the Texas Panhandle. These could be some big time hail producers like we've seen. And then they travel southeast, weakening on the way as they move further into Texas. And back behind that, there's that cold shot that we talked about up in the Northeast, right, man? That's this Thursday morning. And look at those temperatures, guys. You're going to feel this in a big way. Widespread 40s coming for your area into portions, a good part of the upper Midwest, back into the mid-Atlantic, and also into the portions of the Northeast under some of that chillier rain. I think the rain pretty much, held further north into New England. But yeah, 40s and rain, that's a chilly rain for you guys. And further south, you can see where the moisture surge is out here with the higher temperatures at nighttime. And then that feeds with the higher dew points. And so there's Thursday as we transition on the surface map. Again, you got that stalled frontal boundary, right? So you got the cold front that moves in, drier air back behind it. And then you've got, the low pressure center draped across Florida. And then again, you got that persistent northwest flow that just inundates systems that blow up east of the Rockies into the, daytime heating hours. And then they traverse southeast into the overnight time frame, weakening along the way. And finally, by Friday, we start to see this low pressure slowly start to drift towards the coast. So finally, this cold front is going to be moving out and kind of fizzling out. Then the dominant force is going to be this low pressure center that's still hanging off the coast of the southeast. But I think eventually by Saturday, it will finally start to move ashore into portions of the Carolinas and North Carolina and South Carolina, and also parts of Virginia. But look at the dry slot, right? You get the dry slot coming in from the Ohio Valley, pushing into further off into the south, going into much of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, South Texas. And then you've got the wet zone back here to the Rockies, middle of the country, West Texas, Western Oklahoma, Western Kansas, portions of Denver, back into western portions of Nebraska. Those areas are kind of in the bullseye of those heavier rain showers. And there's Friday, right? This is your severe threat. Again, higher elevation storms, boom, they blow up east of the Rockies, and then they traverse southbound, east southeast into the overnight, time frame. So there's the setup by Saturday, right? We finally talk about this low pressure center coming ashore back into the Carolinas, back into portions of Virginia. It's just literally sitting and spinning for days and days and days, and it's finally going to be on the move. We still got that persistent northwest flow type setups, even going into Saturday. This is around noontime, but again, later on in the afternoon into the evening time frame, we'll have more storms that blow up into western Oklahoma, portions of New Mexico, down here in the Texas Panhandle, and those will be dropping east southeast. But as we head into your Memorial weekend, right, this is Saturday, this is your temperatures. It's not really dominant heat waves to speak of, right? We don't really see any big domes of high pressure really building and intense heat or anything like that. These are a little bit more comfortable conditions. They will start to build over time as the air starts to dry out across portions of the Ohio Valley. But for now, for your Memorial weekend, it's pretty pleasant conditions across 70s and 80s for a good part of the country. But there's the setup going into Sunday, right? I mean, again, this low pressure still locked over the same areas, back into the Carolinas, back into Virginia. Those feed into portions of maybe Georgia. But there's the dry slot, right? Dry slots to the north, back behind that cooler shot of air. And then there's the wet surge coming in off that flow, off that southwest flow, the more active subtropical jet stream. And that feeds the system. These are higher dew points in these areas. Again, these are attracted to the same areas. These are areas that all layers of the atmosphere are moist. Then you got higher dew points because the soil moisture is starting to get wetter. And that just feeds off those areas. So the atmosphere starts to heat up, and then boom, we got showers and thunderstorms that bubble up in the heat of the afternoon. And then they maximize and you start fishtailing from the northwest down to the southeast. And there's your temperatures on Sunday, afternoon highs. As these areas start to dry out, these temperatures obviously start to go up. So now we're talking mid to possibly upper 80s for a good part of maybe Minnesota, back into Iowa. So same temperatures further south. You're going to be getting to the north underneath that ridge of high pressure that'll eventually start to heat up as we extend in by the end of the month and into portions of early June. So here's the rainfall estimates for the next 5 days, right? So this is that low pressure center that just hanging off the coast. It finally moves ashore as we go into Saturday and Sunday, possibly Monday. So this is kind of your only game in town as far as the rain goes. And then draped across Florida, but for the rest of the country, it's been high and dry, except for the middle of the country, right? So you got that surge, that's where all the action's going to be. And then you got that dry slot across portions of California and much of the Southwest. And going into your Memorial Day, we find ourselves the same ways. As the ridge, as the drier conditions continue for a good part of the upper Midwest and the Ohio Valley, those temperatures start to warm up. So I wouldn't be surprised you start seeing some lower 90s start showing up on the map by the time we get into your Memorial weekend, as we head towards the end of May up here into the upper Midwest. And again, as we head towards Tuesday, going into your Memorial Day, there's the shot of rain still draped across the same areas. There's the dry slot, and then there's the areas across the Texas Panhandle, western Oklahoma, and the middle part of the country as those dew points surge into the low 60s all the way to the Canadian border. And that's why the rain setups are going to be, and it's all complements of this active, more subtropical jet stream. So even going into the next week, right, we've seen the massive drop in the SOI index. That's not going away anytime soon. In fact, this is only going to be more enhanced going forward. This more active subtropical jet stream, we've got these highly elevated above average sea surface temperature anomalies that are rapidly changing from cooler conditions to much warmer conditions. Storms like warmer sea surface anomalies, and that's exactly what they're going to be getting. They're going to be able to pick it up off the southwest flow and then increase the water vapor. A lot of these areas back into West Texas, back into western Oklahoma, into western Kansas. These are areas that really are desperately in a drought. And this is actually a good thing. This will be slowly eating away over time. You're kind of in the bullseye of the most heavier favorite areas to get the most above average rains. And the same consistent pattern continues into early next week, heading into your first part of June. Again, these setups are east of the Rockies. You see your highest probabilities of seeing the greatest amount of rainfall in these areas that have been so drought prone. So this is just a persistent setup that we extend for days and days and days to come. And over time, this is really going to be making a major dent in the drought areas down here into severe and moderate and even almost exceptional drought in a lot of these areas will be slowly starting to eat away over time. And if we look at the overall, precipitation anomalies where we see the most favorite areas of above and below average, all those areas in brown, right? That's your high pressure, that's your sinking air. It's going to be very difficult to rain under that type setup. And then there you go into the middle of the country. You've got that subtropical jet stream and the funnel with an increased water vapor puts the moisture surge all the way up the pipeline, going in, extending further north into Nebraska. And that's as we go into June. And then the same thing with this more active subtropical jet stream that puts the favorite areas of cooler than average conditions on the southern branch. And then you typically have the northern branch, which is your polar jet, less active, right? So you got the probabilities of the high pressure building over the top over Canada, building over the Pacific Northwest, building over north central US, building over the upper Midwest, feeding down into portions of the Southeast. Will eventually over time where you get these same areas with that persistent cloud cover, persistent rain, and with less sun, obviously you don't have less probabilities to heat up. So obviously you're probably going to be likely below average, temperatures. And this is the probability of 90 or better as we go into that first week of June with the ridge of high pressure building over the top. You put your probability chance is much higher under that ridge of high pressure, drier conditions, heat up fast. The soil is dry, so it doesn't take much to heat up that type of atmosphere. And that puts the above average temperatures well into our northern states, back into Canada, and then well into the upper Midwest, and starting to feed into portions of the Northeast back behind that much drier sinking air. And this continues to get deeper, probably start entering drought conditions for these areas up north, as we transition into the first part of June. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and definitely hit the subscribe button if you hadn't already, and catch me the next update where I protect you before and after storm.